and celebrating. And so I felt like, you know what, I'm going to start this conversation called Forgotten Feminists, where we're going to highlight different women from around the world who have inspired me, who have motivated me, who I think are inspirational women and who can motivate so many other women. And the very first conversation I decided to have with our special guest today, Aliya. Aliya is a survivor and an activist against child marriage. And thank you so much for coming today, Aliya, and for agreeing to share your story with us all. I'm going to talk with Aliya for about the first maybe 40 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to Q&A, and then you'll all have an opportunity to ask her questions or share some comments with her. And yeah, so again, Aliya, thank you so much for joining me and for being my very first Forgotten Feminist, Forgotten No More.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes.
So Aliya, can we start off with just take it all the way back and tell me, so you grew up in the States, you're born in Pakistan, like all the way from the beginning. Tell us your story.
Sure. Oh yeah. So I came here to the United States when I was somewhere around 4.5, 5-ish. And yeah, so I was pretty much raised here and I never went back until I was 17. And I do have a Muslim heritage. So I grew up in a practicing Muslim household, which was strict. And the first time that I was—
Can I ask you a little, do you mind if I just ask you a little bit of details about strict? Just because people, I think, it's such a spectrum, right? Like we say, liberal Muslims, moderate Muslims, strict Muslims, fundamentalist. So can you just tell me a little bit about what it was like for you growing up?
Sure. So I finished the Quran at the age of 7. I started wearing the hijab at the age of 8. And, you know, it was forced. I hated it, every minute of it, you know, going to school and then putting it on. And, you know, I guess I was already a rebel. Like I did it for like the first year, and then I would go to school before class, I would take it off. And then on the, after the bus ride, at the end of the day, I would put it back on and then I would walk to the house. And that went on from elementary school all the way until I graduated.
It was brave of you to do that in elementary school.
It was emotionally taxing. I mean, when there were parent conferences, I would put it on and then people would be like, you know, why is she wearing that? And, you know, I did explain to some of my teachers that, you know, I don't want to wear this, but this is something that I have to do. And, you know, for the conference, I'm going to have this on. So I would say that beforehand. But, you know, whenever we would go out with the family, I would have to have it on. Prayer, you know, my uncle who raised me, he prays 5 times a day. So prayer was very big. We used to, you know, pray all the time, go to the mosque, Thursdays, Fridays, Ramadan, Muharram. So I do come from a Shia sect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Muharram and all of that. So when I say strict, it was strict in that sense. And even in the beginning, when we were children, I don't know why this is with okay, so my background, my paternal side, they're Pakistani Muslims, and my maternal side, they are Indian Muslims. Somehow, Indian Bollywood movies were not to be seen at any cost. Like if my uncle found out that we watched a Bollywood movie, he would create, you know, chaos in the house. And, you know, he would like beat, you know, my stepmother and like all of that. So, and she is equally religious. And she's just gotten more and more and more and more religious up till this day. But yeah, so it was that kind of strict, you know, household. Things got better in the area of that, you know, now everybody watches Bollywood or whatever, but still like they're stricter in a lot of other ways. I'm someone who has had a lot of friends who are, you know, Hindus and Christians and Jews. And from a very young age, it was told to us that, you know, Hindus are, you know, they're infidels, and drinking water or taking food from their hands is not permissible. Any type of, you know, idol worshipers. And a lot of my friends, of course, we're Hindu, we're Jewish, we're Christian. And, you know, I got into a lot of trouble. I've gotten into a lot of trouble in my childhood and my young adult life until I moved out. I moved my children and I out. So, you know, called names, you are this, you're a witch, you're going to take your children to hell with you.
All right, before we get to that part. So as you're growing up in it's very strict, I mean, that was definitely the right word, fundamentalist Islamic household. So, and then it gets to the point, the first sort of shock was when you were 15 years old, right?
Yeah.
So what happened when you were 15?
Okay, so even before that, when I'm going to be very, very blunt here. When I had my period, I received the marriage talk. I belong to a community of Muslims in a mosque who the girls were married off in a very, very young age, and mostly to their cousins from back home. So whether
this is in the US.
Yes. So whether it may be India or Pakistan, they were taken abroad and they were married, and then they would come back and they would sponsor their spouse. So we were given examples. When I say we, it's me and, you know, my cousins or my half siblings who I grew up with. So we were given, you know, the idea that, hey, look at like these girls from these families were an example. You know, look, she is 15 and she got married, and she is this and she got married. So, and those were the type of girls who I never got along with.
Yeah.
From the community, I stayed far away. Yeah, so I received my marriage talk, the marriage talk when I had my period. And then at 15 years old, I had a cousin who had a proposal from a guy here. And they came to see her, but then they also liked me for their younger brother who was in his 30s. And this guy was a predator. He was looking at me, you know, with all these expressions. Oh my God, I hated every like second of being around him. And so I was pressurized into saying yes for the engagement. Like it wasn't like a proper engagement, but it was like, you know, like you have my word that yes, to say yes for the proposal. And, you know, thankfully, yes.
I just want to talk a little bit about that pressure, because I understand it because I went through it. I wasn't 15, but I did go through something similar when I was 19. Actually, the first time was 17, but anyway, I just want to talk a bit more about that pressure because I think it's really difficult for people to understand the pressure. They think that they literally have a gun to our heads. So, you know, there's family pressure, there's society pressure, there's religious pressure. And you were talking before about these girls that are put up on a pedestal of like, oh, look at them at 15 years old, they married. So talk to me a bit about all of the different pressures, the different coercions for you to accept you don't really, but anyway, you're 15 years old and this 35-year-old predator is interested in marrying you and you are grossed out by him. So what are the different instruments that are used to pressure you into succumbing to this?
Sure. Manipulation, you know, giving references of religion and how good Muslim, Pakistani girls are supposed to be. you know, God-fearing daughters, how they're supposed to be. And yeah, there was a lot of pressure on me, especially with my stepmother who had raised me. So this is going to be for later, but I'm just going to say it. She manipulated me into the marriage later on by saying, you know, I raised you, and you know, you're not even going to do this. And so it's just a lot of emotional manipulation, a lot of religious references. Good girls are not supposed to say no, and we know what is best for you. And I remember I didn't even like say a proper yes, but it was just something that was assumed, you know?
Yeah. Because there's a hadith that says,
yeah,
a girl's silence is her consent.
Yes.
Yeah. If you just sit there and cry quietly. I mean, it's funny that they use the word consent, because that's like the perfect thing for a rapist to say, right?
Yeah.
You know, oh, she didn't, just silence is consent. She was scared out of her mind and didn't say anything, so therefore it was okay. But I feel like the coercions around hijab are very similar. So going back to when you were 8 years old, you were never really asked, do you want to wear this? It's not really like we're given a choice. So even when they say like forced marriage, it's kind of hard because, or forced hijab, it's like you weren't pushing against it. You can't push against something when you're a child, and when there's this whole system that includes the Almighty Allah that is pressuring you to do something. You literally just submit or succumb. You don't, there's no room for pushing back against any of this. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think I pushed back in the way that a, you know, child could. Later on, when I was like 12, 13, I would wear my hijab, like, you know, I would let parts of my hair show. And that was my way of kind of rebelling that, hey, you know, I don't like this and I don't want to wear this, but here, you know. So, but yeah, definitely. A lot of people think in the West that hijab is a choice. Hijab is only a choice for the privileged. Hijab is not a choice for many girls who are wearing it forcefully, who are silenced, you know? So
yeah, definitely. So you pushed back against the hijab, which I feel is, I mean, absolutely amazing. I can appreciate how phenomenal that is, because I did not have the courage to do that. So when you were 15, did you push back against this creep?
I definitely said, you know, I don't want to get married, but then, you know, like I said, all the manipulation that this is what good girls do, and then referencing the girls from the community who have gotten married, who have listened to their parents, and then, you know, saying like stuff like, if you are, you know, if you are not abiding daughters, then Allah is not happy with you. Just a lot of stuff like that. And then I, you know, there was a lot of pressure. And I remember going to my cousin's wedding, who had married the guy's older brother. And I remember my uncle kind of like giving me his blessing, putting his hand over my head like that. And that was just like, I just felt like crying with, and I was like, oh my God, I do not want to marry him. And he was following me around the marriage hall, like constantly. It was so creepy. But, you know, thank God that there was a family kind of a situation where my cousin was unhappy with the guy. And so then that broke off.
And so then it broke off for you too, as well.
Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah.
So you got out of that situation, and then a couple of years pass.
I got out of that situation, and then, you know, there were marriage proposals coming from the community and all of that. I kept, you know, just saying no, no, and no. And I grew up in like a pretty abusive household, especially for me being the child without a mother and a father. So I was treated like pretty badly. And I tried to, I remember in my high school, I told the nurse of the abuse that was going on, and social services were sent to my home. There was a lady who came in the house. She saw a big chandelier. She saw a big house. She saw amazing furniture, and everything was so lavish. She saw me. I was fed. I was clothed. And then case closed. Case closed. Yeah. So after that, they really wanted me to go to Pakistan. And I don't talk about this. But I think this is the first time that I'm ever going to talk about this. I really didn't want to go. So what I did was I faked taking pills. Like, I didn't really take pills, but I told my nurse at my high school that I did.
Yeah.
So they took me to the hospital. And then I was at the ward for like 3 days, and then they let me out. But that was my way of saying, like, I don't want to get married. And, of course I did not take pills. Of course nobody wants to die. But that was my way of saying, hey, I need help. I cannot get married. And I thought that would kind of wake my uncle up and be like, oh, okay, let's kind of like leave this alone. But instead I was taken to Pakistan. And yeah.
I mean, it's just shocking two shocking things that you talked about here that I want to identify. First of all, how social services, child protection did not protect you as a child. This is something that you and I have in common. And then secondly, how our families can be so callous, can be so heartless to our emotional well-being and to our emotional needs. Like, they really genuinely don't care. This is what needs to be, as far as they're concerned, this is what needs to be done for the family's honor or for whatever reasons they have. And our opinion of that didn't matter how much I expressed to my mom how miserable I was. You really could not have given your uncle a bigger sign saying, there couldn't have been a bigger cry for help. And it's quite impressively shocking how they can look past that, as a mother yourself and as a mother myself now, and thinking like, if my child was crying out for help to that extent, how could I not stop and pay attention? I mean, I know he's your uncle, but he raised you. And so to think like how he can override his human feelings and still push you into something that he knows that you're so against. So yeah, I just want to talk about those two things. So first of all, social services failing you.
Yeah.
I think that's something we need to really talk about, because it happens in the US, it happens in Canada, it happens in the UK, it happens in Australia, it happens in all these Western countries that supposedly care about the minorities. And we're the ones that are being thrown under the bus. We're the ones that are not being protected. So if you want, you can give us a little bit more detail about that.
Yeah. It was just, there was just a lot of abuse going on in the home. Like, I would be beaten, and this wasn't just necessarily in regards to the marriage. It was just, I was the stepchild, and it's just a lot of things. I was actually treated like Cinderella. Okay. Like, I was taking care of the whole house, my own self, schoolwork, my stepmother's children, and it was just a lot. And then I would get beat. I would get beaten up for that. Like, it's just all that. And like, I have always been, it's really, I've been a very complex person. So I was really how should I say this? I would listen to them, to my family, but then I always had my ways of rebelling, just as I did with the hijab, you know. I remember when we were sent to Iran, we meaning me and my half sister, for ziyarat, for a pilgrimage. And oh God, when we came back, I was like, oh gosh, I got into major trouble because my uncle who went with us, you know, he reported back that I was wearing makeup and I was wearing my hijab up to here. And I had the United States shirt on. And I was, you know, I was doing all the stuff that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And yeah, so although I would listen to them, I still had my, you know, little ways of rebelling back. Yeah.
And how did child services just discount all of that? So for me, the excuse they gave me was, well, this is your culture and this is your family, and we have to respect the way that they want to raise you. Did they give you any kind of, you know, rationale for why? Is it just because they saw that you were affluent and they just assumed that, that people with money can't abuse their children?
Yes. So when I explained to you what she said about the chandelier, about you know, being clothed in a Banana Republic shirt, or like, you know, she literally said all that to me.
Wow.
Like as if I should be grateful. As if I should be so grateful. No, you can have the best, you know, adorned house or a coffin, but only, you know, you know, that person who is living in that hell house knows the reality. I mean, yeah. So she totally dismissed it, and case closed. Yeah.
God, that's horrific. I was doing an interview on CNN once about women escaping from Saudi Arabia, and the interviewer asks me, but aren't women in Saudi Arabia super rich, and they have drivers and they have nannies and they have house cleaners and cooks? Like, why are they trying to escape that? I'm like, a gold cage is still a cage. Like, it's a gold prison is still a prison. What a weird, it's such a, I felt like it was like the stupidest question he could have asked me, you know? But this social worker did the same thing in your situation. Like, it's such an odd assumption that only poor people abuse their children.
Right.
Oh, God. And did your family know that you had contacted child services? And how did they react to that?
They got to know about that after she had come.
So after she dismissed it.
Yeah. So, you know, so of course they were mad. And, you know, then I was taken to
they pushed even harder to get you married probably after that.
Right. So after that, I told my nurse that I took pills. This was kind of like a wake up call. Like, I really don't want to go, because they were really talking about getting tickets and, you know, all of that. Like, I would hear them speaking on the phone with relatives back in Pakistan. And, you know, so I was like, oh my gosh, this is really going to happen. So I faked, you know, I hate saying this. I faked taking pills.
Yeah, you were trying to save your own life.
That's what I could do, you know.
Yeah.
And instead that backfired on me. I thought, you know, hey, I know these two people, my uncle and my stepmom, you know, they treat me like shit. But still, like, if I did this, maybe they would kind of, you know, have some kind of compassion. But that backfired on me. I remember they came to my high school, and they were trying to excuse the absences for our trip beforehand. And I remember telling my principal that, I don't want to go. But, you know, what could that principal do? I mean, he could have done a lot, really, but at that moment he was just like, hey, you know, there are two parents here, and I guess he just felt like he didn't have the authority because two parents were here and they were, you know, yeah. So the absences got excused and I was taken.
So
and
now
I was
we have
taken in January. I was taken in January of 2003 and I was married in February of 2003.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
I just want to reiterate to everybody that you first had teachers that knew you didn't want to wear hijab because you're taking it on and off, and you're telling them I'm going to wear it during the parent-teacher conference. So they knew that you were rebelling against that world. You had social workers involved who decided to throw you back to the wolves because you had nice chandeliers. And you had a principal who also knew because you were saying, please don't approve these absences. So that's 3 adult Americans that could have intervened and helped you in these situations.
Right.
And it really makes me feel like I tell my story so much, and I'm in Canada, and this is why my organization is Free Hearts, Free Minds, because if this is what you went through in the United States of America, the freest country that we have on this planet, just imagine women in Pakistan or in Afghanistan or in Saudi Arabia or in Somalia or in Egypt or in 50 other countries across this world. You know, like, we're so privileged that we're able to even talk about this right now. Our situations, you know, what I'm hearing from you today sounds like a horror movie, and it's almost too much for the brain to comprehend that you are one of the lucky ones, you know, like that your horror story is actually a fairy tale compared to other stories out there. Because I feel physically sick right now. Like, I just want to hang up and just cry in a ball right now. I'm so angry for everything that happened to you. And the reason why I'm feeling extra angry right now is because we talk so much in our societies. We talk so much about gender equality, and we talk so much about protecting minority women, women of color, you know, tell their stories, empowerment, blah, 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 blah. But when it comes right down to it, we're cowards, and we don't support each other, and we don't protect each other. And it's incumbent on all of us. It's our responsibility. Every single person needs to feel compelled that when they see a girl in your situation, that they do whatever it is in their power to help her, to support her. But unfortunately, that's not the reality that we live in. And for you, it meant that you ended up within a month marrying some guy in Pakistan at the age of 17. Had you even graduated from high school yet?
No. So after the marriage, I stayed for a month. This was long ago. My son is gonna be 18 next year. So yeah, so I stayed for like a month, and then I came back, and then I had to work twice as hard to graduate. After graduation, I was sent back. So yeah.
So when tell me about marrying this guy. Tell me about this,
yeah.
How it went in Pakistan.
Yeah, so when I went there, I was given a few proposals, and they, when I say they, my uncle, my stepmother, you know, all my paternal side, they were the ones who was gonna, you know, they were gonna choose the best person, then have me just say, you know, yes. So throughout all these proposals, like, I did not want to get married at all. And then there I saw, you know, an opportunity to get out of it in the form of one of my paternal aunts, her brother-in-law. Okay. I was a teenager. So, you know, I found him attractive. He found me attractive. We were flirting. And then I was kind of like, oh my gosh, you know, we barely interacted, but he told my aunt that he would like to get engaged to me. So I was like, oh my gosh, you know, this is going to happen. So why don't I just get engaged, come back, and break the engagement off. That was my plan.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the father of this guy, he was, so I was 17, he was 20 years old. So the father of this 20-year-old guy had the same temperament as my stepmom. So my stepmother was like, nope, he's not letting me talk. He's not letting me, say the things that I want to say. And her reaction was like, no. And plus she probably found that guy to be not, how should I say this? Not old enough to control me.
Oh.
So that was, my plan right there, just fell apart right in front of me, right in front of my eyes. And this guy came along, and he is actually my biological mother's first cousin. So he's like my uncle or my my second cousin, I guess. And yeah, everybody agreed to this. He was 25 years old. I was 17. And they just, I remember crying. I remember crying really, really badly, like for like 3 days. Like I was in the room of my aunt's house and I was just crying, and nobody cared. Everybody just came and just, gave me the same bullshit that, look, good girls, good Muslim Pakistani girls, listen to their parents. God will be happy with you. And this is going to be good. This is going to be good for you. And up till I remember the day of the marriage, when the imam asked me, in Islam, we have to say 3 times, I do. When he asked me,
we don't have that in Sunni Islam.
Really?
No, I never said a single word.
So, so they expect the girl to say, 𝗃𝗵𝗡 hai, meaning I accept. I accept. Yeah. So, and most of the time a nod is, taken as a yes. And I either had to nod or quietly whisper a yes. And I remember when he asked me for the first time, I just felt like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, I just felt everybody was watching me and I just had to say yes. It took me a minute until I said yes. But yeah, that's it. And I was married off. And when the night of my marriage, my ex-husband's sister told me, just sit there, don't do anything, and he will do the rest.
Just be quiet as he rapes you.
It was disgusting. And of course, me being the rebel that I am in certain ways, I took off the false lashes, I took off everything, and I wore a black Pakistani outfit. Yes, I did that because that was my way of saying, that was my way of saying no.
Yeah.
No. But did that help? No.
And you can't actually say no because you are his property.
And not only that, you have to think about your family, and you have to think about, their honor, and then their religion, and you have to, the pressure as a 17-year-old having to think about everything and everyone but myself. I'm so sorry.
I know exactly what you mean. But I want to pivot to your success story and how you overcame and how you saved yourself and your children, and you put all of this behind you, And not only are you a survivor, but you are an activist who now spends her time and energy helping other girls who have been through what you have been through. So tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. So I spent like 6 years in the marriage, if I'm going to count my, I spent 6 years in that marriage, you know, dealt with abuse. I was beaten, I was tortured, I was body shamed, you know, constantly. I was bullied. He and his nephew, my ex-husband and his nephew, they would get together. I have kids who were like a year or two younger than me calling me aunt. I mean, it was just, it was horrible. I had to play the aunt role. I had to be, you know, I had to be the daughter-in-law of the house. And I was a 17-year-old who just wanted to be a 17-year-old and just go to college and have, you know, like a normal life. And, you know, so I was constantly bullied by both of them together. I was beaten, I was tortured because I would rebel back. And I won't ever forget this one scene where, you know, I complained to his father because they lived in a joint family system. So I complained to his father once that, you know, that your son says all these words to me that, you know, I have never heard of in my life in, you know, the Pakistani language. And, you know, it's really abusive. I was holding my son. He pulled me by my hair and he dragged me. I remember my son, he was only like 10 months old and he was shaking. I will never forget that time. And, you know.
So the people that you go to for help.
He was 6'3", and you know what I did? I slapped him. No, even though I'm trying to, you know, I'm trying to play this role for the sake of my family's honor, for the sake of his family's honor, for, you know, for the sake of Allah, for God, you know, to be like this good, you know, Pakistani Muslim, you know, person. I was still trying to show him that you do not own me.
Yeah.
I slapped a 6'3", 6'3" man. I slapped him across his face, and that was not taken lightly. I ran into the room with my son, and I was in there for like a whole day and, you know, night, and I was just scared of what's gonna happen. But, you know, yeah.
You were still in there. The fighter, Aliya, was still in there.
Yeah.
Despite all of this. And this is going to sound weird too, because, you know, when you grow up in a family that is abusive to you, when your husband starts being abusive to you, it's kind of like familiar, expected, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's too bad this isn't different. You know what I mean? I kind of had this feeling like, oh, I really hoped that this would be different, but it's like, oh, well, I guess this is how it is everywhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So you kind of, there's no reprieve, you know, you grow up with that kind of abuse from your uncle and your stepmom, and then you marry this guy, and then it's the same thing.
It is literally the same thing. So years went by, and then I got pregnant with, so in between all this, I got pregnant with my son. I was brought back here, delivered, went back, you know, so I was doing all the going back and forth while I was still in school, because this was something that I never wanted to give up. So I was attending college classes, pregnant. I was working. And then I would go back there and be in that, you know, be in that abusive kind of space. And even back here in the US with my uncle and his family, it was abusive because I would hear stuff. For example, you didn't bleed. When I heard that comment from my stepmother, I remembered back to the morning of the marriage when my ex-husband's sister came in the room and she checked the sheets. You know, like I would hear all these comments about myself. You know, here's my stepmother speaking to my half siblings and my cousins about me. She's this and she's that. And, you know, she talks back to her husband and she said this and she, you know, like a bunch of things. And she didn't bleed. She's ruining our name, our, you know,
absolutely disgusting
reputation, all of this. And then I would go back into, you know, I would go back to Pakistan and have to deal with him and his abuse and, you know, psychological, physical, emotional abuse, and then the body shaming constantly. Like it was too much. Yeah. But when I came back with my daughter, when I was pregnant with my daughter in 2006, things started getting even worse because I would have to communicate with him on the phone, or what was the social media app back then, MySpace or something like that. Yeah, so I would have to communicate with him, and then, you know, he would like abuse me, you know, on chat and on the phone too, calling me like a whore, calling me a slut. You are effing in the classroom. I'm pregnant with your child, very much pregnant, like all of this. And I would go and take these conversations to my uncle, and he would say, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to look at it. This is your job. You have, it's the woman's job to, you know, to make it work. And, you know, when it got too much, and when I found out that he was with someone else,
oh my gosh,
too, that's when I was like, I really thought, I was like, oh my gosh, you know, do I really want this kind of person for my kids? Do I want this sort of person as a father figure for my kids? Do I deserve this? Do my children deserve this? I said no. And I remember having, you know, a conversation with my uncle in the basement. That's where I stayed. And he said that women in our families in Islam, the only way that they are free from marriage is when they die. Oof. And that is the same time after he went upstairs, I called immigration and I canceled his paperwork. I was like, F that, that's what I'm gonna do. And, you know, like, I always found myself taking like a step. If somebody told me, you know, not to do something, that was like, you know,
I'm going to do it.
Yeah, especially because it had to do with my children. And, you know, I was, what, 20 years old at that time, pregnant and with, you know, a child already. And I didn't finish college. I was still going to classes. You know, a lot of the times when the daycare wouldn't accept my son when he was sick, I would take my son, and I was pregnant, you know, to classes with me. So I never let that aspect ever go. Like, I had to finish school. Yeah, so I took the first step, and then I told my uncle, hey, I did that. You know, I canceled his paperwork, and it's really not going to work out. I had to hear a lot from them, you know, a lot from them. I've gotten beaten several times asking about, you know, divorce. When I say they, my uncle and my stepmother had told all the imams here not to speak to me, not to take my calls. Because, I mean, the marriage happened over there. And the thing is, when you are married so young, especially, or even not married, when you belong to like a practicing Muslim family, most of the times you don't know what is going on. Everything is done for you. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know where my marriage license was. I didn't know where the nikah papers were. I absolutely didn't know. And, you know, the first time I saw the nikah nama and the marriage license was when I moved out with my children, and I asked for my own stuff. I texted my uncle. I said, I need everything that is mine, you know, my birth certificate, like everything given to me or else I'm going to call the police. And he left it in the mailbox. I went and I picked it up. That was the first time I saw the immigration paperwork for him. That was the first time I saw, you know, anything. Yeah.
I can't even imagine you must have just been in full-on survival mode at that young of an age with 2 kids to just say, that's it, I've had enough, I'm moving forward. I mean, you obviously didn't have a plan, you didn't know where you were going or what you were doing, you just knew I've had enough of this and I'm getting out. I
just knew the why. I didn't know the how. I knew the why, and I knew why it was so important, or else I would be stuck in this cycle that, you know, a lot of girls are stuck in. And they are silently just going through life, being stuck. And I thought about my daughter. I was like, do I want this for my child? Let's say when she, you know, when she gets her period, do I want them to be giving a marriage talk to her, finding her proposals? No, I am going to get myself out of this. The how will take care of itself when I take the step. And that's what I did. You know, nobody spoke to me for 2 years. So it took my divorce 3 years. Nobody spoke to me for 2 years. And, you know, I was in contact with the Sharia board in Pakistan, who granted it to me. And during that time, nobody spoke to me. They spoke of me in front of me, but never to me, you know.
So that was emotional manipulation to get you to change your mind?
Yeah, my little kids would be told, your mom is a witch, your mom, she is evil, she'll be taking you to, you know, to hell, you know what I mean? And, you know, at that time, you know, I was starting to completely like rebel, because, you know, I just had enough. I had enough. I had been through enough. I have 2 kids to take care of on my own. And I have had enough. And, you know, of course, again, I'm going to mention the aspect of Islam where having friends who are not Muslim, who are Jewish or Hindu, it was a major thing in my household. And, you know, my kids would be told, your mother takes you with her Hindu friends, you are going to be going to hell with her. She's doing, you know, she's giving you a ticket to hell with her. Like all of this crap would be said to my kids. Your mom is not a good person. She got divorced. She, you know, just all of this nonsense. And that is what had me move out with my children. And I really didn't know. I only had money for the first month's rent. Again, I didn't know the how, but I knew I had to get out of there. And my uncle and everybody found out the morning of, when the moving trucks came, that I am moving out. And I remember my uncle was lying on the bed, and from his room, he said, if you leave, you will never come back here. I was like,
and you're like,
yeah, I was like, that's exactly what I want.
What did you think?
I don't want to come back here. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to have any connections with you all. Yeah. I don't. That's the whole reason why I am moving out. Yeah. So after that, you know, oh, by the way, I did complete college. I went with both of my children at times, double strollers. You know, first it was a single stroller, then it was a double stroller. And, you know, when the daycare wouldn't accept them, I would go to college. My daughter would not drink from a bottle. So I had to drive from the Montgomery College campus in Rockville all the way to where I lived, just to feed her twice a day and then go back. Wow. So, I mean, I have been through, like, you know, typing up research papers with 2 children at night. You know, it was, when I think about all this, I am kind of like, oh my gosh, you know, I really went through a lot. But the thing is, I never gave myself permission to stop and process. It wasn't until I found Unchained at Last, which is an organization which, you know, which advocates to end child marriage in the United States. And when I had written my first testimony for, for a bill in my state to end child marriage, that was when I, thought about everything that I've been through. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the time to process. And that's when my journey, as an activist to end child marriage, and now as, an supporter of apostasy, critic of Islam. So, that's how everything went about.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you a little bit about that. So at what point in all of this did you start to question your religion that you were born into?
Very young. Very young. I remember taking walks with my step-grandmother in the evenings, and she would talk about heaven and hell like all the time. And I would be the one who would question, but why do girls have to wear the hijab? Why aren't boys wearing it? Why do girls have to listen, and boys can do whatever they, so I would ask little questions, and I would be shunned. I would be told, oh my God, you don't ask these questions. Allah is gonna be really upset. So I started asking, these sorts of questions from a very young age. Although I did pray and I did, I did read the Quran and all of that. But that journey began very young.
Yeah. And when did you decide, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm not going to identify as a Muslim anymore. It's not serving any purpose for me.
I guess that started right after my divorce, or even like before that. I'm a person who likes to research about all religions, all kinds of beliefs, and I am a spiritual person. So I started, kind of focusing my attention away from Islam and learning about, about everything else that there is in the world. And it just made sense to me, especially after reading the English translation of the Quran twice. It just made sense to me that, that no, this religion is, this is not for me. And those feminists who say Islam is the most feminist religion in the world, no, it is not. And your hijab proves it. So,
Yeah. I think that's very telling that you said that, because you had memorized or you'd read the Quran. I think you said you were 7 years old, but it's gibberish. You don't speak Arabic.
I don't understand it. I don't speak that language. And I think that is the problem with a lot of people. They don't understand what they are reading. So therefore they don't know.
Yes. Absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
So.
Well, I talked so much with you. I'm going to ask you if you're okay with staying on an extra 10 minutes or so, because I took into people's Q&A. So if you have a question for Aliya, then please click on the, I guess is there a hand up? Can you click your hand up or something? I think it's under reactions. Yes, under reactions, you can click to raise hand. Aliya, I just want to take a moment while people are raising their hands now to say that I am absolutely in awe of you and of your strength. And I am so grateful that you shared your story with us. And I'm really, really grateful that you're working with Unchained at Last. Is that what they're called?
Yes. So I am a mentor. Yes.
Yeah. And all of the people that you mentor, how lucky they are to have you. So we've got a question in the chat here. How did the people who raised you explain your family's presence in the US, an infidel country? The age-old question.
So it's very, I talk about things that are very unpopular, and people are gonna label me as you're racist and you're an Islamophobe and you're this and that. It's very strange people want to be here, but people don't like America and don't like the American culture, don't like the Western culture, yet people want to be here and they want to make money, they want to, you know, live a good lifestyle, but they, you know, they want to stick to,
but they hate it.
But they hate, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And it's so confusing growing up as a American with a, you know, with a Pakistani Muslim heritage. It's really confusing. Like sometimes I would ask myself, why did you even bring me here? You know, like what did you expect me to do? Now, my half sibling and my cousins, they're all religious. They all wear hijab. They're all, you know, they're all brainwashed. I chose not to be. I'm probably the only one in all of my family, like relatives and everyone, who has cut off. So the relationship is between like being raised here in the West, but then at the same time hating the West. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
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 Okay, so Lois, I think your hand came up first.
While I was listening, I was thinking, you know, I had an atrocious marriage, but it was nothing compared to what the two of you went through. And I just finished reading A Good Wife by 𝗃𝗓𝗢𝗃, and my heart goes out to all of you. So anyway, but after my marriage, for years, I had these dreams that I was back in it. And the dreams were so haunting. And I just suddenly wondered if any of you have experienced that kind of thing. Like I would dream I'd gone back to him and married him again. And I thought, it was horrible. Have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah, so I haven't experienced dreams of going back into the marriage, but certainly I still dream of my childhood home and the things that I've been through over there. And that is something that, you know, that I often dream about. And at times, you know, my kids find me and they ask me, Mom, why are you saying, because in my dreams, like at times I'm telling my stepmother to stop, you know, and I'm saying it out loud while I'm sleeping. So I do find myself going back there. Yes.
Again, I'm in total awe of all of you, and I think about the two of you and Samara and others are so strong. What about the women that aren't that strong? Oh, thank you.
Yeah. That's what we have: fight, flight, or freeze. And most of us know that if we fight or flee, we will be punished, if not killed for it. So most of us freeze. Absolutely. Trisha.
And
sorry.
I would just like to mention something, that freedom always comes at a cost. Even though I have moved out, I still have relatives from time to time patrolling my neighborhood. You know, and that is the worst, especially when I remember a few months ago when I had took my dog. I have a lab, chocolate lab. I took my daughter and my lab for his appointment, for my dog's appointment. And my son didn't want to come. He wanted to play here. He wanted to play ball with his friends here in the neighborhood. And he texted me that they're here. And I know what they're here means. And I swear, like my heart just kind of just dropped. And I was like, I have to go. I was in the middle of my puppy's appointment and I just had to make that choice. I was like, can I reschedule this? And I had to come here. And in the meantime, I was driving and I was, you know, my daughter was holding the phone. I was on with the leasing office and I told them, if anybody, you know, here, you know, comes in the leasing office asking for me or for my children, or if you see a car outside, you know, like a Toyota van, please, like, you know, can you kind of watch out for my son and have him come inside the leasing office? but you know, things like that. Like, you are never really truly free, especially as a woman, especially as a female who belongs to a Muslim faith, whether I have left it or not. You know, you're never really, really free. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, it's like a cult, right?
Yeah.
And they feel like you, or like the mafia or something, like they own you.
Yeah.
You have to always,
Yeah.
Trisha.
I missed about 5 minutes at the beginning, so excuse me if I'm just looking at something that was already covered. I wanted to find out, you know, when you tell your story, I'm struck by what a thing you were treated as, you know, by your husband and the family, and it wasn't even like a person. So I wanted to find out about your advocacy today. What, if you could talk a little bit about that, and if there was one thing you could change that would help women in the US who are going through something like you went through. If there's one thing in America that you could change, like, you know, affect the courts. When a child says they're being abused that way, don't look at it as, you know, a cultural thing, or, you know, it's a human rights issue, or, and I wanted to encourage you to something. You seem kind of ashamed that you did this faux suicide attempt as a child, but like Yasmine said, you were trying to survive, and you would use any tool at your disposal as a child to survive, and that was a tool available to you, and you tried it.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
Yes. So as far as my advocacy work goes, I am involved with the National Coalition to End Child Marriage here in the United States, as well as I do mentor child brides, and not only child brides, but those who are forced into marriage here in the United States, and also involved in the legislative work as well, where I testify whenever there's a bill in a certain state to end child marriage. By raising the marriage age to 18, no exception. What that does is, you know, if a child, okay, so when a child gets married, they can't legally get any help, right? When they are turned away by a lot of organizations, they cannot obtain their own divorce. So therefore, raising the marriage age to 18 makes sense. So far, we have 6 states who have ended child marriage. So we have a lot of states to go. And, you know, when I first spoke about child marriage in my own circles, so I am a Unitarian Universalist as well, and I co-lead the Women's Advocacy Climate Group for that. So I brought up the topic of child marriage there, and people just don't know that the United States also has a child marriage problem, and people are always shocked. And that is because a lot of girls, due to fear, don't speak up. You know, they just don't speak up. There's not a lot of support. So my personal work, between juggling with my kids and then my professional work as a spiritual consultant, and then all this volunteer work that I do on the side, my focus mainly had been to make an impact first in my own communities, because that's how awareness spreads. So yeah. So I've been speaking about child marriage, and recently I've started speaking about Islam and, you know, apostasy, and yeah, so.
Thank you, Aliya. I'm just going to quickly answer one of the questions in the chat where Hadassah, you're asking if we have anything similar to it in Canada. So it's kind of what Aliya was saying, was there are many states that still, you know, that the child marriage is still legal, whereas in Canada, it's already illegal. So we don't actually have any Canadian services for Canadian people like that, but we do have just like advocacy groups that help people from different communities who are being forced into marriage, but it's not nearly as it's not the same as it is in the US, because it's not a legal issue. You know, legally they're like, they get taken out of the country and they get married over there and stuff like that, or you have to have the parents' permission, so they sign. So there's advocacy groups that help, that are made up of volunteers and stuff like that. So that answers that question really quickly, and then we'll move on to 𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗧, please.
Hi. So I've actually spoken before with Yasmine. She's familiar with a little bit of my story. So I grew up Orthodox Jewish, and I like moved away from that. And I found, like, through your conversation, a lot of like some similar comparisons of how you describe, like, with hijab and stuff like that. And I found it's very interesting how, like, even though you don't want to do it, you have to sort of conform to a certain extent, but then you find your own way of like moving away from that as much as you can to express your, you know, you don't like it and stuff like that. So I found that very interesting, and just so many different things that were comparative to like my own experience. But you sort of answered my question. I was wanted to ask you about your relationship with your family now, but you answered the question by describing how they come around and follow you around and stuff like that. That clearly tells me that you don't really have a good relationship with them right now anymore, or you don't really communicate with them actively. So you did kind of answer my question to that extent, because that was my main question, you know. Yeah. But yes, overall, like, I just found it so interesting, and I found like your story very courageous. And I will say what 𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗧, back of what she said, that 100%, when you're looking for a way to survive in a situation, taking the steps that you need to take to survive that is what you have to do. And you can't think about, you know, how, you know, even though, yes, it's a difficult thing, you know, faking a suicide attempt, right? That is a very, very serious thing. However, it's something that you have to do. You have to take what's available to you and use those tools and you know, and find your way to survive. So definitely.
And also, you were 17.
Yeah, you can't like judge yourself for something you do when you're 17. Like, you can't judge yourself so harshly. You really can't. You know,
you don't have many choices when you're 17. You're going to do whatever it takes.
Oh. Yeah. And I know I had a classmate who got married at 16, and I was horrified. I was horrified by that. I was absolutely horrified. Yeah. And one last thing I found very interesting as well, how you were describing some of the ways, you know, the domestic violence that occurred. And by all measures, that is considered domestic violence, controlling somebody's income, controlling their access to their own property, like your birth certificate, things of that nature. Like, I wonder, in a similar way, maybe you could tell me, because I know, Yasmine, you had mentioned before that, you know, when the government had basically shut the door to you, when you said, I had this childhood situation going on and I was being abused, they shut the door to that and said it's culture, right? At any point, Aliya, did you maybe consider to discuss the domestic violence with somebody, like going to authorities at all? Or was it because already in the past, you know how that went, that it wasn't something that you were interested in doing? Because by all measures, that is domestic violence, you know, controlling the access, like the way your uncle was treating the situation, and, you know, the physical violence, 100%. Like,
yeah, there was one point when I asked about the divorce in the process, you know, about the Sharia, because my stepmother was in contact with the Sharia board in Pakistan. I did ask about that, and my uncle was around and she was there, and I got beaten up for it. And I did call the police.
Right.
I called the police, and I called the police because at that point they even took away like everything from me, my laptop, my phone, and I had papers due for college. my laptop, my car keys, my phone, you know, I had children's appointments. Like I was doing everything on my own. This family was not helping me in any way, not financially, not in any way. And instead I was doing work for them, cooking for their whole household thrice, you know, taking care of their children if they would leave them home, and then taking care of my school. And, you know, I worked at the Montgomery College Refugee Training Center back in those days. So that, and then my own children, it was just, you know, it was too much. And then he took, you know, they took away everything from me. And that's when I called the police, and the, you know, and the police came. And yeah, I at that time, I never thought of moving out, okay, because I was still in college. So calling the police was my way of saying, hey, if you ever do something like this again, touch me again or anything, you know, this will happen. Right. So, oh yeah, I have called the police. I have gotten my documents back. You know, I have done that. Therefore, I'm like this evil, evil, evil figure, you know, and it's, and news spreads fast in the Muslim community. And by now, you know, everybody knows this evil person, you know, from this family named Aliya, and oh God, you know, she's an infidel too on top of that. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I have contacted with the authorities.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good because, you know, actually, like, because my father was very abusive as well when I was growing up, and my mother did that also, called the police one time, and that stopped him from ever really from like the physical violence kind of stuff. He was still abusive in other ways, but the physical violence stopped because once my mother called the police the one time, he wasn't going to do that again because he now knew this was going to be the outcome. You know, so in the same way, when you're showing them, when you do this is the outcome.
Yeah.
This is the boundary.
But then the emotional violence continued, and then they put my daughter in a hijab, which she hated. But yeah, she was only 5 years old. My stepmother cut her hair without informing me, put a hijab on her, and you know, I fought back. I said no, she's not going to wear a hijab. And then I was also against Sunday school. So my way of rebelling for Sunday school was, you want my children to be in Sunday school, you take care of it. I'm not dropping anybody off. I'm not picking anybody up. I'm not attending the meetings. I don't want the emails. And, you know, because at that time, you know, I couldn't just move at that time.
Right.
So I was like, you want to do it? You can do it. But she's, you know, but as far as school goes, my daughter's not wearing a hijab. And I made that very, very clear.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Like, that's something that's very obvious to me, that when someone says, an adult woman says, it's my choice to wear a hijab, I'm like, in my back of my mind, the question always rises to me, when you were 8 years old or 10 years old, whenever it was that your family forced it on you, was it your choice? And I know for me, wearing religious clothing that I was forced to wear when I was a child was not my choice. I was forced to wear it. So I know that's not a choice. But if I ask this question to somebody, I would be considered Islamophobic. But I know that you can't tell me that an 8-year-old or 9-year-old, 10-year-old has a choice in choosing to cover themselves in any kind of which way.
Even an adult, 𝗃𝗀, because a choice means that you can put it on or you can take it off. But if she takes it off, she's not only going to be dealing with there's going to be obstacles in her life, whether it's coming from her family or from her community or from, in some cases, the society, the government, the law. And then on top of that, eternal torture. So it's never a choice in this, you know, it doesn't matter. But yeah, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. So 100%, I would say that you're 100% courageous, a very courageous woman. And everything that you have done is nothing but like many measures people cannot do because they don't have the internal fortitude to be able to do that. And it's something that takes a lot of courage, you know. And I know that probably your family and other people around would say that you are a rebel and terrible, but it's in everyone else's eyes, it's courageous and wonderful and nothing but a miracle to see, you know. I mean, I know that's for me, you know, that's the way I see it, That's the way I see it. And, you know, that's the way I see Yasmine, and I see Aliya, all the same, all these, you know, you and everyone like you, 100%.
And you, 𝗃𝗀𝗧.
I mean, my story is kind of, but it's not the same, because
we all, it's different, it's different degrees, but we all have that in common, that we all have that, fire in us that allowed us to keep fighting. So we should, you know, we should take a moment to celebrate each other for surviving. Yeah.
Can I mention one thing, Yasmine, really quickly? So when you had posted on Twitter, I don't know how my ex-husband found your Twitter, which was really weird. He's been researching up on me, and he mentioned to you, oh, you know, if somebody was so abused, how did she keep getting pregnant? How did she keep having kids? Well, I want to mention that, you know, a lot of pressure is put on Muslim children who are married, women who are married, to make it work. For the honor, you know, for their family's honor, for their in-laws' honor, for the society, for God.
Honey, I know. That's why I got him suspended.
For the 𝗃𝗊𝗚𝗍, you know, for Shias, it's the 𝗃𝗊𝗚𝗍, right? So like and on top of that, you know, we were told throughout, you know, throughout our like childhoods, like little, you know, things, like women who disobey their husbands, you know, God doesn't like that. And then the sleeping part, if a woman chooses not to sleep with her husband and, you know, in the same bed. And I was told this actually the day before I got married. My paternal aunt told me this, that, you know, just let him do whatever he wants, along with his own sister. But this was before I got married, the night of. She said, just let him do whatever he wants to do. And also remember that if you don't let him, then the angels are going to be cursing all night. So when he talks about, but you kept getting pregnant. I had one DNC before I had my son. That was the very first time, and he was partying in Dubai while I was in the hospital. And I remember I cried in pain being alone when I got sent back to my in-laws' home. I was crying in pain. It hurt so bad. I was like, you know, I was 18 when I had the DNC because the baby's heartbeat, the ultrasound didn't pick it up. And I called my uncle who put me in that situation. You know, like, who do I have to like cry to? Another abuser, you know. And I was just crying that I'm all alone. You know, it just hurts.
No, it's so difficult to express to people how you are so enclosed. You're completely enclosed. You're surrounded by walls, 360 concrete walls just pushing on you. People say things like, you know, why didn't you do this, or why didn't you do that? Like, you're doing a great job of expressing what so many of us have felt, you know, that we really did not have a choice in any of these situations. We had to do what needed to be done. And, you know, you survived, and that's all we can, you know, we can celebrate and be grateful for that. But yeah, no, definitely never look back and think, you know, shoulda, woulda, coulda, because I know, you know, anybody who is familiar with, you know, any Muslim family knows that you did what you had to do. And he was suspended off of Twitter, everybody. I was joking that I suspended him because I didn't like what he was saying, although I didn't, of course. But he was suspended because he was sharing private emails, private information, and that is against Twitter's policies. So he's fucking gone now. Yeah. Erkan, go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks, Aliya, for really informative and courageous talk, as other people have said. Thanks a lot. It's been been really interesting to listen to you. And also thanks to Yasmine for inviting me. It's really great for you to do that. And I couldn't help but, so I come from a politics and sociology background, and I couldn't help but think, drawing parallels between, well, the title of this presentation is Forgotten Feminists, and I couldn't help but draw comparisons between like your voice and say the voices of Black feminists, you know, who, you know, encapsulated by, you know, Bell Hooks' Ain't I a Woman book, you know, and it's kind of the same thing. I don't know whether anybody else has thought about this, but to me, coming from that background, and it's just kind of interesting that this kind of Islamic version of like you know, Muslim feminists don't have the same support, and it's kind of interesting that they don't have that. And I wonder why that is. It's almost as if, like, maybe the point of Bell Hooks' thesis was that she could maybe blame the overwhelmingly white majority West, and that was okay. But in this case, the blame doesn't lie at their feet. So it's not okay to ask questions. I wonder what you thought about that. It's more of a comment, really. Could you maybe comment on that, or what do you think?
I'm actually not familiar with Bell Hooks, but she wrote
a book. She wrote a book called "Ain't I a Woman?" because Black feminists were being ignored by the white majority feminists in the Western world. It was kind of they were being kind of excluded and ignored, and it's a similar situation now with the genuine Muslim Islamic women's voices, I think, because they're questioning their faith, and they're questioning the community and the pressures that you come under. They're questioning those kinds of things, so it's kind of more taboo, I think. Yeah. I mean, I wonder what you think about that.
Well, talking about the current time, I think they're very well heard right now.
They're
Black feminists are very well heard, especially in the United States.
They are now. They are now. But right. I'm just saying, Bell Hooks' book launched that movement. Long ago,
yeah.
But what I'm saying is, getting this kind of movement off the ground, you know, the Islamic kind of feminist movement off the ground in the same way is proving a lot more difficult, and that's the point I'm making.
So are you talking about ex-Muslims? well,
I mean, not just, I mean, it could be people, I mean, people like, for example, lots of people, lots of women still remain Muslims. Some of them become atheists. Some of them convert to other religions. It doesn't really matter. But to me, right. I'm just, you know, whether they're ex-Muslims or whether they remain Muslims.
Right.
You know,
So I feel like here in the United States, Muslims are very much heard. Minorities are very much heard. Black people, people of color are very much heard. And I think everybody, can I just be blunt here, Yasmine?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I personally just feel like everybody is each other's, ally. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. And here in the United States, it's very easy to shut someone down with labels. You're a racist, you're an Islamophobe, you are, all bunch of phobes because I don't like what you say. I take offense to it.
Yeah.
And, the problem with Islam is that Islam itself does not allow people to criticize any aspect of it. Because if you criticize, if you shirk, then that's blasphemy. Blasphemy is not accepted. Then you are not a Muslim.
Well, this is the real enemy, though, isn't it? This is what I mean. In the case of people like Bell Hooks and other kind of Black feminists in the 60s and 70s, there was no religion to hide behind. There was no niche. There was no exotic minority religion to sort of hide behind and to use as a kind of shield, right? So I think that, you know, that's possibly faith is the thing that maybe makes the big difference. That, I mean, you say that everybody has a voice, and I think that's true, like more and more today. But I think that we're not happy to hear stories like yours because of concepts like Orientalism, Islamophobia, this kind of thing. We're afraid. People are afraid. I mean, I come from a partly Muslim background myself, but people are afraid to talk about these issues because of the faith, I think.
And I think people should be speaking about this, especially if you really believe in equality, in freedom, in, you know, feminism. You have to, I just personally feel like most people should be speaking out. But then again, they're afraid to offend their friends, offend their allies. And, you know, I think for me personally, as a free thinker, I'm not someone who is, you know, who is going to kiss ass just because, you know, this is, you know, somebody who is my friend, and you know, I'm the sort of person who's going to call out wrong for wrong. So I feel like a lot of people don't want to do that, because, you know, if they raise voices like mine or Yasmine's, you know, and like countless of others, I feel like most people feel like their narrative is going to get lost, or they won't have the support of the people that they do for their work. Does that make sense? Like, am I?
Yeah, like they'll latch on to your grievance, and that will become the new, and then they'll leave the other stuff behind. Is that what you mean? Like it will become like a kind of fad. Is that what you mean? Or like they?
Can I try and guess what I think you mean?
Please.
Because right now there is a lot invested in blaming everything on white supremacy.
Yes. Yeah.
White is always the core of every problem.
Yes.
And if you were to look at my story, or to look at Aliya's story, or to look at, you know, countless Black women's stories, then you would have to admit that that simplistic view of the world is not true. And they've just invested too much time and energy into creating this dichotomy. That's why it can be so easy to solve the Israel-Palestine issue, right? Who has lighter skin? Problem solved.
Don't get me wrong,
that's my perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you say there.
Which is just, stupid anyway, because a lot of Israelis are darker than I am. But anyway, that's a separate issue. But but that's my perspective on it, Erkan. Sorry, Aliya, you were going to say.
No, I was just saying, you know, the multiculturalism is a big thing here in the West. You know, people don't want to see that in its negativity, you know, the abuse that is hid under multiculturalism. They don't want to see that, you know, because that would be changing the narrative, because everything has to be racist, everything has to be blamed on white supremacy, everything has to be blamed on white people. And that, I mean, as someone who is from the United States, as someone who's 99% of you know, my circle are really far, you know, left woke, I know the mindsets. I've just left, you know, I broke away, you know, so yeah.
Sarah Hyder, I don't know if you're familiar with Sarah Hyder. She makes a comment.
I do know her.
Yeah, she makes a comment along those lines that multiculturalism and intersectionality has nothing to say about the abuses that take place within communities. It's all about, you know, it's every interaction is between white and Black, or dark-skinned and white-skinned, and that's the only thing that they can comment on. They have nothing to say about the kinds of abuses that can take place within people's own communities, and that is a huge problem with intersectionality and multicultural and woke culture and all the rest of it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, because then it ignores all the victims under there.
Indeed.
So Aliya, you've got a bunch of questions in the chat. Should we delve into them, or have you had enough? I asked you for an hour and I've taken an hour and a half of your time already.
Yeah,
so.
I put it in my schedule until 4 because I know things can get like.
Okay. All right. Well, let's delve in then, because there's quite a few. Let me scroll all the way to the top here. First question is from Faith, or actually second question. I already asked you the first one. What should teachers do to help children who are crying for help when social services and such don't act accordingly? Thank you for sharing your story. So glad you stayed strong. Keep on keeping on.
Thank you, Faith, for that question. Well, what should teachers do? You know, Yasmine, I just really feel they should be more persistent.
I think they should just treat us the way they would treat any other kid. So if they treated you like they treated any other American kid, you know what I mean? Like if you saw another American kid clearly, you know, wearing different clothes at school than what they were sent to school in, do you know what I mean? Like that they were asking you, please don't approve this vacation time, you know what I mean? Like that you see the calling out for help is happening, then I'd like to believe that that's the whole reason why Child Protective Services exists. And it's going back to Erkan's point about when it is another American child, they would be more willing to step in, but when it's you or me, they'll be hesitant because of the fact that we come from Muslim, Arab, Pakistani backgrounds.
Yes, because it's their culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's their culture and we're not going to get into it. Yeah. But then you're the same people who want to get into everything, every kind of, you know, justice work and equality, but this.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah, but I think teachers should take students more seriously who confide in them rather than, you know, just looking the other way and not trying to find out more about what is going on.
We have precisely the same problem, by the way, in the UK. Like 14, 15-year-old girls go missing from the class for a week or, well, 2 weeks. And, you know, especially in the north of England where I'm from, and the teacher just ignores it. They never contact the parents. And of course, the girl has been to Pakistan and been married and this and that. So it's the same. Yeah, we have the same thing.
You guys ignore British girls too, with all of the Rotherham gangs and stuff. Again, because the perpetrators aren't white. They're mainly Pakistani Muslim. So they turn a blind eye to those girls. I'm going to jump back to Jen, and then I'll go back to the questions that are in the chat.
I'm trying to think what my point was. Oh, okay. I was having a conversation with my family recently. I'd read your book, Unveiled, and I was at the cottage with lots of sisters and moms who were discussing this, and I'm Canadian as well. So it really hit home your story, Yasmine. So just to go back to the conversation we were just having, I'm raising these concerns with my sisters and my mom. I'm like, we gotta speak up. We gotta get out there. And, you know, my mother's response, which I think is very typical of Canadian fear, is, well, we don't want to encourage those people that did, like, as Yasmine will know, London, Ontario, there was a driver in a van who smashed into 4 Muslim folks recently and killed them. And that was huge, huge news. And we don't want to be part of that. We don't want to be associated that. We don't want to be part of hate. We don't encourage that. So that, I just thought I'd throw that in there to the conversation.
How is supporting victims the same as a genocidal killer who runs down a family who are going for a walk? Why are we being equated with murderers? It's so unfair. It is so, sorry to jump in here, Aliya, this question was for you, but it's just so infuriating how they fucking do that. Like, does this, when we're trying to speak up for ourselves, why does that mean that we're so hateful that we're being equated to killers? Sorry, Aliya, go ahead.
No, yeah, I just feel, I feel the same way. I feel the same way as you do. You know, it's kind of like as if people are choosing sides, like they are more worthy than these people who already have to, you know, to spend their lives in silence. And now they are bravely, you know, risking their lives to speak up, but let's silence them more because we don't want to offend minorities. We don't want to offend people of color. Again, it all goes back to whiteness, white supremacy, racism.
I think there's a fear of appearing intolerant and appearing racist. And so they can't, I think speaking as a white person, that's where this is coming from. I can't even handle that association because of all the guilt I already feel for the things my ancestors have done. You know, I think that's part of it.
Well, I honestly believe that the West, the United States, has made a lot of progress. That's why my country is so great. We've made a lot of progress. And I'm the kind of person, even in my personal life, I choose to look at progress. And I think a lot of people don't do that. And when you don't do that, guess what? You get the same of, you get more of what you are, you know, thinking about or being from your past. I feel like we've made a lot of progress. I feel like everybody, again, this goes back to privilege. Americans are so privileged that it stinks. Yeah.
Anyway, I just want to say I'm an ally and I'm going to try to be more brave on social media. I still have fear of being labeled something, a phobic or whatever, but I'm with you ladies and I thank you for your story. I will be spreading it to my sister.
Thank you so much, Jen. I will say too that maybe it'll help you if you have any pushback and maybe for the next conversation that you have with your mom and sisters. The cultural relativism that both of us, Aliya and I, have complained about with the social services and teachers and stuff, ignoring us because we're the wrong skin color or because our families come from a certain religion or a certain country. Your mom and your sisters and everybody who thinks like that is doing the same thing. Because what you're saying is, if these girls had been from an evangelical Christian family, I would speak up for them and I would support them. But they come from a Muslim family, so I don't want to touch that. That's too volatile. And it's really back to what I was, when I was saying how Aliya was describing all of the pressure from all angles pushing us. We're seeing that all over again. So we got out of our communities, we got away from our families, and we jumped into what we thought was the liberal, left, supportive, progressive, open-minded world. And again, we're finding all of these coercive methods all around us, pressuring us to shut up, to be quiet, to stop talking. Our stories are Islamophobic or hateful or whatever. So just try to remember, just throw it back to the person and say, if these girls had come from, if they were Christian and their families were from, you know, Southern United States, they're coming from a Baptist family or something, would you be acting the same way, or would you be willing to speak up against the abuses? We're not, and then, you know, there is not a anti-racist person alive who would be able to say, yeah, I'll support a white girl, but I won't support these brown girls, right? So it's not put the ball in their court because they're going to try and put it in yours.
But of course, of course, you know, the people who are very determined would have a ready-made answer for that. You know, they would see that as a kind of conservative trope or something. You know, you're playing into the hands of, you know, this is the sort of thing that they do all the time, right? If you push back, if you argue the point, they say, well, are you just a wolf in sheep's clothing? You know?
Yeah, supporting LGBT equality, supporting women's rights. Those are typical far right talking points. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I have been labeled as a conservative too, and I am not a conservative. You know, I would identify as someone who's in the middle, but on the left. And, you know, it's just if we push back, giving unpopular truths and experiences and opinions, that pushback is taken as, oh, you're conservative, you are right wing. And that is really confusing. And, you know, that just pushes me more and more away from the left, more and more and more. Yeah.
So Gina's question is along those same lines. So you may feel like you've already responded, but I still want to read it because it's a sweet message. She says, what do you suggest happen with the left in the West who continually ignores this issue and overall treats minorities and people of color like pets and proxies for their vanguard fantasies, or being an afternoon savior, but doing nothing for us in reality? God, yes, Gina, you are awesome. Oh, there you are. I know why they do it, but no one is really calling them out on this point. What do you think will bring attention to their hypocrisy? It is hurting so many. And by the way, Aliya, you look great for having a big kid of 18. I would have never guessed your kids are that old.
Thank you. Yeah. Yasmine, do you want to take this one? Like I've been trying to bite my tongue a lot when I'm talking about these issues.
Girl, this is not where you bite your tongue. I
through.
don't know how to bite my tongue anymore. I bit it for almost 30 years. No more biting.
Yeah.
Gina, you said that you know why. Did you want to share with us your perspective on this?
Sure. I'm Indigenous. I'm OG American, been here for thousands of years. I grew up in a red state. I saw the hypocrisy there. I've lived in Los Angeles, work in entertainment, been here for almost the same amount of time. I've experienced this myself as a woman of color and in and around people on the left. And it's actually been quite scary. And I've been very frustrated by it. And I could go on and on about it. But yeah, it's actually, I almost feel like they want us to stay victims. I really do. There's in my own community in the United States and Canada, women go missing all the time. They're murdered. There's been no talk from feminists about this. There's been nothing. And to sit there and say it's all just the white man's problem, it's not. I have lots of white friends. I have friends of every walk of life. No, I don't think it's, you know, it's, I almost feel like people on the left are bored and they're just looking for something to do. And they want to find the most hapless,
such a perfect word.
People that, you know, because for us, you know, I'm the first generation of my own family, even though we've been Americans forever, to have running water, paved roads, electricity. My folks didn't have that until they left the reservations and stuff like that. So, you know, my parents almost starved to death a couple of times when they were kids. And if you go back to live there, it's really, you know, we got our 1%ers too that run casinos and things, but for the most part, it's a pretty hard life. So you have to kind of leave to get away from that. But they want to continually just, they look at us like we're this thing that they're bored. They really have nothing to complain about. They have paved roads, they have running water, they have electricity, they have food, access to education. I mean, things that the rest of the world really don't have. A lot of people, you hear their stories. I meet immigrants from all over. My hairdresser's from Iran. She tells me crazy stories about what her life was like there. So, you know, they don't really listen to these people, but what they're bored. And I think they're just looking for somebody that they can use as kind of a proxy to vent their frustrations about life, honestly. And they look at the Islamic world this way. They look at us this way. They look at the Black community this way. And it's like they almost, they make excuses for so many things. And then, you know, what we're going through, nobody wants to talk about it. There's a lot of these problems, you know, like I said, there's women that go missing all the time on the reservations and stuff. There's not been one word about it, not one word about it. And it's like, I just sit there and I go, wow, you know, you guys continually just want to blame men for everything, white men, but, you know, it's far deeper than that. And I think they would really have nothing to do if they didn't have us there. And I really don't think they want us to be, they really don't want us to be ambitious. They want us to continually be a victim, because then they have, you know, it's this weird kind of sick relationship. And not all big people on the left are like this, but there's a lot of it, believe me. I live in a town, it's weird. LA is really a weird place. I've lived here for 20 some years, and it's one of the most segregated places I've ever seen in my life. There's the lines of where everyone lives and where everyone doesn't live. And so yeah, it's like I said, I could go on and on and on, but it really does frustrate me, because I see this, and I read stories like Yasmine's and now yours, Aliya, and I'm just like, you know, why is nobody wanting to talk about this? I'm glad that you are. I love hearing about this stuff, because it needs to be talked about. And 𝗃𝗊𝗢𝗡, I don't know if I'm saying your name right. I've read Bell Hooks, and she does talk about this, and I've appreciated her perspective, because yeah, it seems like feminism has really forgotten a lot of women, and women who, you know, we have a point, and we're women too. And even if we decide to stay religious, maybe we don't, maybe we want to become more traditional. It shouldn't matter. We seem to be kind of kicked out of the club when we don't want to be perpetually their thing they take off the shelf to go, oh, look how sad. And then, you know, so anyways, there you go.
Yeah. I just want to say one thing. It's because we're not the right kind of victim.
Yeah.
We're not the ones that fit their narratives. That is why. Like, I really believe so. Because like I said, everything has to go back to white supremacy, or else it will be ignored. A lot of people will stay silent, and silent is complicity. And then there are those who are going to throw labels out, you know, the usual labels. You're an Islamophobe, you're Islamophobic, and you're racist, and all of that. So yeah, and you did mention something that I really thought, and which is that a lot of people on the left want to, you know, they don't want to give tools of empowerment. They want to keep people in chains. And it's so sad seeing the very people who they are portraying, you know, to fight for, those people are eating it all up. They're playing into the hands of, you know, people who really don't give a shit. I mean, that's what it looks like to me personally. Yeah, because like I said, if you're going to keep bringing up things and not recognize progress, you're going to stay stuck. Even if things have become, you know, a lot better. Like, for example, I heard this, I live in a blue state, okay? And I live in a very wealthy state and in a wealthy county. I could not believe on social media, people were going around saying, you know, like a Black person cannot run anymore, cannot jog anymore. While I had in my neighborhood, people having barbecues right outside, you know, of their homes, listening to music, running around, jogging. Like everybody wants to have this specific narrative of something and stick to that. If anything is beyond the narrative of white supremacy, it's going to be ignored. And I just feel really terrible that, you know, some people might have great intentions, but all they're doing is they're just keeping people in the state of victimhood mentality. And yeah.
I mean, I've personally seen people that I work with sometimes. This is a good example. Who, again, you know, I've been in entertainment for almost 20 years, and it's a very left place. And I've heard them make excuses for places like North Korea. They've said that a conspiracy of the United States, that the people that are there are actually happy. I mean, these are things I've heard people say. I've also heard them make excuses for Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and that she was one person that had a bad experience with Islam. I'm like, Are you guys, can I swear here? I feel like,
yes, please.
I mean, seriously, I'm just like, that's crazy, guys. Like, no, that's not her one experience. There's a lot. I mean, but it blew me away that people would make an excuse like that. And I'm like, no, this is a person that she's really smart and she seems to like, I mean, why would anyone make that up? And it just, I've been really shocked at some of the stuff I hear people say about, you know, that part of the world and, you know, making these excuses. And I mean, like I said, I know people from there and they've told me, like, I have a hairdresser that she was put in jail for going on a date in Iran. And she got caught by she's lucky that worse didn't happen to her. But I mean, like, again, I don't think people realize like how good it is here sometimes. I know that we've got problems. I'm not saying we don't, but yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of people try to come here all the time for a reason. And I'm frustrated at the left in the West who've just turned into this weird, I can't even explain it. And in my industry and in our world, if you speak out, your job's gone, your career's gone. I mean, I'm at a point where I don't care. I just don't care anymore. But, you know, I'm willing to, it was about 3 years ago that I finally was like, this has got to stop. I can't, you know, I can't do this anymore. But, and I slowly stepped away from it. But yeah, and personally, me personally, as a human being, I don't want to be viewed as a pathetic loser. I'm a lot more than that, you know. I mean, my ancestors built empires here. They did all these cool stuff. And so, you know, and I look at like people from the Islamic world, I know that they've got to feel that way too, that they're a lot more than just this one-dimensional thing that's just there to be somebody's, you know, pity project and then thrown back away into the back of the closet when it's not fun and you're not that exciting anymore. But you know, I really, for some reason, the West does this, you know, in the left, and nobody's really calling it out. I can't even explain it. At least when I deal with people on the right, even if they are terrible, at least I know where I'm standing with them. But on the left, I really don't know a lot of times until you're suddenly in this really crazy situation where you're like, what did you just, wow, you know? And yeah, you know, I don't know what it's going to take, but the left has got to really start dealing with this because they're not helping and they're hurting a lot of people all over, not just here, but everywhere.
Can I share something really, really quickly, Yasmine?
Yeah, absolutely. This is your show. Yeah.
So the church that I belong to, the Unitarian church that I belong to, I shared with a friend about the horrors of Islam and what I have been through, right? She listened. And then a few months after, she made a comment to me saying, oh, Aliya, there is I'm gonna talk about race here, okay? I'm just mentioning this. Said, oh, Aliya, there is a Black UU minister who also had a Muslim background, and she spoke about all the, you know, terrors of Islam and the abuse that goes on with it. And now I believe you. That was a slap to my face. That was a slap to my face.
Was that UU minister's name Aisha by any chance? Because I have an ex-Muslim cousin named Aisha who's a UU minister, and she might have been that person.
I forgot, but that minister was Black.
Yeah, she's, well, we're Egyptian, and she calls herself Black because it helps in America. It's Africa.
Yeah. So just to hear her say that I believe you now, that's
terrible. Yeah.
That made me feel like, oh my gosh, like, am I not going to be believed because I'm not, you know, I'm not colored enough? Like, I don't.
Ayaan Hirsi Ali could not be more Black. She had a death threat stabbed into the body of her friend who was shot in the head, 𝗃𝗏𝗄𝗏, Vincent van Gogh's grandson. Yeah. And they still say, like Gina was saying, oh, it's just her story. You know, like what is it gonna, like, you can see how dangerous it is for us to speak out, and that's why so rarely you're hearing our voices. And also because we get denied, because we're told it's just you, this is only your situation. And so they don't believe us.
Yes. I was testifying for a bill in Rhode Island by the way, which passed. So Rhode Island is one of the states here in the United States which ended child marriage for the bill. And I brought up growing up in a Muslim household. So the next person who was testifying, she brought it up, and she said that the woman who spoke before me brought up Islam. And I would just like to say, Islam is not like that. Yeah. And she went on and on and on defending Islam. And how dare I bring Islam up? Yes, when you have a Muslim mosque, a community that little girls are married and nobody is doing crap about it, rather they're praising them and telling their own daughters, giving, examples of those kids who have been married off, I will talk about it. That is my experience.
Well, let's just talk about 53-year-old prophet of Islam marrying a 6-year-old girl.
Yes.
That's it. And he's the best example of all humanity for all time. So you can't tell me after that that it has nothing to do with Islam.
Yeah, and that was the first time that I brought up Islam, and like that woman could not take it. She was like, she brought up Islam and, that is incorrect. She said that is incorrect. Girl, that is my experience.
Mm.
I'm so sorry. People reject experiences that fall within their narrative.
It's so hurtful too, when you go through so much emotional turmoil to finally be brave enough to speak up and tell your story, and then to be not believed, and to people saying she's not correct. Like, I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
We have a lot of questions here. So I don't want to miss anybody. I just want to say this little comment from 𝗃𝗍𝗀𝗡𝗏. She says, thank you so much. I too am in awe of your courage and the gift you have given your children. Just wanted you to know that she said that. And Harry is saying, thank you. Many thanks. Trisha is asking, how did your children get through the trauma?
Okay, so my children, they're much older now, but when they were younger, how should I explain this? After I moved with my children here, I pretty much have shielded them from everything. When I do all this advocacy work, like I make sure that they weren't around to hear me testify or to, you know what I mean? Because I have kept my children very, very much shielded, because I want my children to grow up, in the most healthiest environment. I don't want them to be, to be disturbed. And yeah, so if I would want to cry, I would cry alone. I'd go in my car or like something. I would just do all this. I would cry in the shower or like stuff like that. I wouldn't really. And when it came to the abuse that the family, my uncle and his family, I would just tell them, at that time, they were very small. I just used to tell them, no, that is not right. Just ignore them. And I used to keep them with me, like, all the time as much as possible. But for instances, like if I would go to make a grocery run, that's when my stepmother would come down into the basement, lock the door, and tell them about me, like fill their heads with all of this nonsense. And then when I would come home, they would cry, mom, she like locked us and she was saying all these bad things about you. And I would just sit there and I would just be like, just ignore that. You know how I am. There is nothing wrong with having, friends who are not Muslim, because that was a big issue. That why was I hanging around with Hindus and with Jews and with like Christians? Why am I have always been an outcast in my mosque community. I just never fit in. My half sister and my cousins, they're so much part of that community. They're all their friends. They're over at our house. It's okay because they're Muslims. you know, I remember a friend coming over to my house, and first of all, it was a he, but the thing was he was a Hindu, so that was a problem. And he flew all the way from India actually to come here, and he was at my door. But my uncle's reason for that was not because he's a boy at that time. He said he's a Hindu person. Like, how are you going to let a Hindu person in our home? Like, you know what I mean? So like I've tried to kept my kids, you know, like I've tried to shield them as much as I could. Of course, when they were older, you know, 15, 16, that's when they started hearing, you know, like then I sat down and I had like a conversation about the things that I've been through with the marriage and all of that. Yeah. But
I did the same
you have
thing,
to stay strong for your kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's why you never really get a chance to.
Yeah.
Trisha is saying, I think the lack of support from Western feminists is quite different than in the past. Mainstream feminist movement not allowing in voices of Black women or other minorities. Yeah. Western feminists have a long history. I'll just finish reading it. Let me finish reading it, and then Western feminists have a long history of shying away from criticizing men of color and minority men.
Yes, that is 100% true because they're minorities.
Yeah, sorry,
you know, and we have to shine the best possible light on them.
Yeah, because they're minority
for the sake of multiculturalism. Yeah, it really sucks.
Did you want to respond to that, Erka?
Yeah, I just think that maybe that comment I made is it's been confused a little. It's caused some confusion a little bit. When I said I was drawing parallels, I'm drawing parallels between the exclusion of, you know, I was really making the point that what we have is hypocrisy now. I was pointing out the kind of hypocrisy involved, because previously there were kind of women of color who were being ignored, but now there's a different agenda and they're being ignored for other reasons. So it's a kind of hypocrisy. So I'm not saying it's a perfect comparison. I just want to make sure that Trisha and maybe some others, maybe you confused what I meant. I didn't mean that there's a perfect parallel. I just meant that, you know, that these voices are being ignored, but they're being ignored for different reasons. It's like a kind of hypocrisy, you know.
And Black women are still ignored if they want to speak up against Black men.
Yeah.
But that's still the truth. But they're not allowed, but their voices are heard if they're speaking up against white supremacy. Lois wants to know if you've ever been called an Islamophobe.
Yes. Yes. Many times.
Yeah. Lois is asking again, we Westerners are so afraid of how we are seen. How would we behave if we were afraid for our lives? Great question. Yes, please do think of that often. Not you personally, because you're fine, but others, like, you know, put yourself in that situation. Rivka, is it choosing appropriate victims and oppressors? I'll keep going. Trisha is asking, Gina, can you suggest any websites or organizations to learn more about the missing women, etc., from your community? So it's the red dress. You can answer us now if you like, or you can write it in the chat.
Oh, sure. I actually sent her a link privately.
Oh, I'm late. Okay.
There's an organization called Native Hope, and they address some of this. And those are some folks in the Great Plains. And I Red Nation Film Festival. It was run by a really cool lady named Jonelle Romero, and she's out here in LA, but they cover some of this in in the film festival and with Indigenous films and things like that. And there's certain days of the year. I know that the red handprints, the other one over the mouth, and that also symbolizes some of that, because somebody's got to talk about it. I mean, we try to, but you know, we don't get heard that much.
Yeah, I personally on my social media do share about Native Americans and the issues that they are facing, they have been facing since forever, and the missing women. And just like my post about Islam, I barely get any interaction.
Yeah.
You know,
and another parallel to make is I've had a lot of girls from Australia send me messages where, you know, the Aboriginal community in Australia, girls are quite often married off at like 13 years old. And it's acceptable there by the Australian government because, again, it's their culture. And so a lot of those girls are writing to me relating to my story, feeling like they were also, I don't know, fell through the cracks of the system, I guess, where there's like one part is trying really hard to be supportive of the Aboriginal community in Australia, again, because they have many reasons to feel guilt and regret. And so they're trying to be as culturally sensitive as possible. But through doing that, they're allowing things like child marriage to happen and turning a blind eye on abuse. And I've even had social workers from Canada and Australia write to me telling me that they're haunted by how they've had to turn away children that they knew needed help, but they've had to, for the sake of their careers, they just, they had to leave the kids in the abusive situations that they were in. So
that is so sad.
All right. Well, I just wanted to thank you again. There's a long discussion going on in the chat, but I don't think I've missed any questions. Hopefully everybody who had a question for Aliya had a chance to ask. I'll just pause for a moment here to make sure that nobody else wanted to say anything I missed.
Aliya, thanks for your story. That's it. Seriously, we need more of these. And I know probably it was not easy to talk about some of that stuff, but there's a lot of people that appreciate it. Seriously. And you're a good mom.
Thank you. Yes. You know, thank you guys for listening, and thank you for, you know, thank you to Yasmine for giving me the platform. And I was actually, you know, just so overwhelmed by the situation in Afghanistan. And, you know, I was like, am I ready to, like, you know, sit down and have this conversation? But then I thought, hey, you know, this is important and the show must go on. Yes.
I just want to say thanks to everyone for just providing a space for a sane conversation, by the way. You know, we just had a sane conversation. It makes a nice change. So, yeah, thanks.
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to say that it's important to like continue to call out those times where people on the left or want to say that they support women, but then go about and play this little game when it comes to women that are not necessarily, you know, within that framework of what they want to see, you know. I mean, I think in a certain sense, you have people like Linda Sarsour or others who stand up and say everything is wonderful when we are a Muslim, everything is amazing, my life is beautiful, and it makes it really hard for people like yourself to go and turn around and say that it's the opposite for some people. So I think it's important to continue to show the hypocrisy when there's a lack of support and a lack of appropriate support for women who are suffering, for girls who are being, you know, forced into a marriage in all these different types of situations, and to find a way to like communicate that. We're saying, no, you're the one who's actually being the racist, because you're the one who's saying that this person has less value. And that's where, that is what racism is. It's not just saying, it's not just like some small little, you know, you know, like this small little thing, it's pointing at anywhere where you say that a person who is of a different color, a different creed or whatever has less value. That's the person who's really being hateful. That's where someone's really being hateful. And, you know, it's very interesting that for me, myself, I've had times where I have people trying to make comparisons to like TV shows about Jewish women who have escaped Judaism. I'm like, their stories is true. Like, people ask me about these kind of situations, but for some reason, people are so much faster to accept their stories as accurate, but then want confirmation from me constantly about every scenario. How, like, where is this in your life true? Like, how is this exactly what you experienced? And you know, it makes an uncomfortable conversation. So I understand when you're saying how people come up and want to tell you that they believe you now. It's like such a hard thing to hear, because you're like, this is my story, and I know I'm not the only one who has this story. Like, that's your experience. So I think 100% we should find a way to bring this conversation up front and make sure that it stays up front in people's minds, that they don't just accept that the few people standing up and saying everything's wonderful are not the only ones that are standing up and saying, like, and speaking, you know, because there's real people, women, young girls are really suffering. Like, they're really suffering. And you know, it breaks my heart every time. It really does. It really does, you know? And you know, and even my life was not as rough as you guys, but I still suffered on that by the name of religion. You know, the name of religion results in so much suffering. And if we can just like continue to talk about those things and make sure that the awareness is there and it does not go away, regardless of how much people want to say that it is Islamophobic or anything like that, that it does not stop, like that conversation does not stop, because it's so important. It's the only way to save other people, the only way, in my opinion, you know.
Linda Sarsour is one feminist who is complicit. She's an enabler and an encourager to many girls who are suffering under the religion of Islam. I mean, I read her tweet recently about Afghanistan. She said something like, not word for word, but she said something like, you can have compassion. You can talk about the Afghan situation without talking about Islam. You can speak about the women, Afghanistani women, without speaking about Islam. And then she mentioned she said without being Islamophobes or Islamophobic, something like that, she said. And I was just like, how can you not talk about the Taliban without speaking about Islam? Like, are you like, is this for real?
Yeah. So we can talk about Nazis without talking about anti-Semitism.
I'm sorry.
Or we can't, or like, you know, the same conversation was, you know, we can't talk about Israel without including all Jews. You know, somehow we can figure out the separation. Some people have sort of figured out a separation of Jews and Israel, but they have not figured out but in their mind, like they think it's all, but they think they found a separation between Jews and Israel, but there really isn't, for the most part. For some, like the political sense, it's not, but otherwise it is the same. Like, you know, yelling about Israel ends up violence against Jews. And yet somehow, right, there's this element that we're gonna say that the Taliban is not Islam, when they literally say that we are following the edicts. Like, I don't understand.
It's called the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan now. That's the new name. They would be the first people to disagree with Linda Sarsour. So,
and in a sense, it's possible that she's privileged versus other people who possibly are not.
She's privileged, but she's not stupid. She knows exactly what she's doing, and I think that's the fallacy here, is that people don't get that she's an Islamist, that she's saying this and doing this for a reason. She has a purpose. She has a narrative. She's not just that fucking clueless. There's no way that anybody's that stupid. No, she's not stupid. She's hoping that you're that stupid.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So you're saying is that her intention is just the same as the men who are imposing this upon other women. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she's basically like, she's 100% complicit and part of it. That's really sad to me. It's very sad. And, you know, it reminds me like the same people that I would experience like in like the synagogue that would be like, you must now do this because otherwise, we're going to tell your mother, it's like the same type of people who are part of the situation, part of the system, and want to encourage it and never allow any bad word about it because they are benefiting from it actively and stuff like that. That's very sad. Sorry, that's really sad.
Gina.
We talk about it, yes.
Can I just say, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just want to put in one word about that, and that's with from Iran, 𝗲𝗀 𝗠𝗨𝗧, who with her movement of photography and taking videos of all these people who are utterly complicit, women who are complicit in this system as well, and confronting the men and women who are complicit in this and then broadcasting it to the world. And what you said just really reminded me of that. And she is truly one of my heroes. And I wanted to put that out there. That's all.
Mine too. Thank you for mentioning her.
I like to say that everyone should be an Islamophobe. Everyone should fear Islam.
Yeah.
There's truth.
Yeah. Aliya, were you going to ask Gina a question? Or
no,
was Gina trying to say something?
I was just going to mention something that she mentioned off of something that she had said about how a lot of leftist responses are, oh, they want to stay there, or they want to they actually, enjoy being there, or whatever, in abusive abusive countries, or whatever it is under Islamic rule. I have read comments about Afghanistan on the president's page from leftists, a lot of them saying, in response to people talking about, well, there are Americans left in Afghanistan. There are allies left, people who helped, the American people are left. Women and children, women and girls and children are left who are vulnerable. And some of the responses, I kid you not, went like, well, they want to stay there.
Oh.
And that is I found that so disgusting. And, of course, like I commented, I was like, well, maybe we should ship you there. Seriously.
That's like, very similar to women want to wear the burqa. Would you want to wear it?
Yeah.
Like, why do you keep assuming that we're these subhuman beings? Like, why do you think that we're so different than you are? Why would anybody want that?
Yeah. But then feminists, Muslim feminists come in like Linda Sarsour, who are so privileged, and they want to paint the best possible image of Islam to sell. And, and then yeah.
I'm going to read you this. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to read you this message from Nasra, who is a friend of mine. And she says here, as a fellow Pakistani North American, I congratulate you on your victory, Aliya. Your children are so lucky to have a brave mom like you. Thank you for sharing your story. Your courage inspires me. Wish you all the best in your journey. And hopefully Nasra will be one of the guests on Forgotten Feminists one day too. So,
yeah.
You're inspiring people already. So thank you very much. Somebody's asking how they can follow you. That's a great way to end this. Thank you for reminding me, 𝗃𝗀𝗧. How can people stay in touch with you, Aliya?
How can people stay in touch with me? Well, I only have a personal Facebook page where I, spread awareness to, my own communities and whoever comes across my Facebook.
If you're comfortable, you can share it in the chat. But if not, that's totally up to you.
Yeah. I generally, I don't accept friend requests from strangers, but there are people following, and I tend to attract a lot of Islamic, a lot of men who are from the Muslim world messaging me stuff. And I'm like, really? So, but besides that, I tried Twitter out. I'm just, if I create a social media profile for the public, I will pass my information on to Yasmine.
Perfect. Perfect. Again, thank you very much for your time. You are wonderful. I adore you. I'm so glad we had this conversation. And thank you to everybody who joined us here today. Yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Aliya.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Yasmine. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.